jobs are created when making a single movie? Well, small ones, hundreds. Large ones, thousands. And that means a whole lot of money for our state. So how does it all happen? Let's back things up. Right before a film is done, it needs a score. That's where these guys come in.
Beautiful.
And that creates a few dozen valuable jobs. Oh, and before that, we have post-production. Editors, VFX, sound, basically computer nerds doing computer stuff. And trust me, without these guys, you don't have a film. Post-production teams can be as large as a few hundred.
And action!
So before that, we have the production phase. You know, where they say action, cut, other cool stuff like that.
And cut! Let's add a little fog to the next take.
Cast and crew on film and TV series can average between 200 and 300. And we all know the crew's gotta eat. Where do you think those hundreds of meals come from 3 times a day? That's right, our local businesses. We've just added at least another 30 jobs to the job counter.
Here's your lunch.
You know I have a food allergy, right?
And before filming, we need costumes designed, props purchased, and hair and makeup done. And lots of set building, which means valuable jobs for skilled Oklahomans.
No, we got the 500. We need 500 more.
But before all the costumes, before all the actors and the special effects, music, it all begins with a location.
So on to locations. Where have you guys decided?
We're going to Oklahoma.
Oklahoma it is.
But wait, why Oklahoma when there's so many places to film in the world? Over the last 5 years, some of your favorite movies and TV series have pumped nearly $100 million into our state's economy. And there's another $150 million that will be spent in 2021 alone, creating sustainable jobs for Oklahoma residents and breathing new life into local businesses. Like a construction project, a single movie or TV series can create hundreds of jobs throughout cities in Oklahoma, sending economic waves across numerous industries throughout the state. All of this has to happen somewhere, and in an age where the demand for entertainment content is higher than ever, why not here in Oklahoma?
Hello, everyone. My name is Yusuf Kazemi, and I'm the Outreach and Production Manager for the Oklahoma Film and Music Office. Welcome to the 21st deadCenter Film Festival. Our office is thrilled to be a sponsor of this year's event and present our Zoom series. Today's session is extra special as we are presenting our topic, Breaking New Ground in Oklahoma with Prairie Surf Media. We are so excited about Prairie Surf Media's opening, what it's going to do for Oklahoma City and the state's film industry, and welcome our special guests, Matt Payne and Rachel Cannon from Prairie Surf, as well as our Oklahoma City Mayor, David Holt. So without further ado, to dive in deeper, I'm gonna turn it over to our moderator, Miss Brandy McDonnell of the Oklahoman.
Right. Thanks so much, Yusuf. I appreciate that. Thanks everybody for being here today in the Zoom world for deadCenter, one of the best times of the year, deadCenter Film Festival. And we're very thrilled to talk to you guys about Prairie Surf. It's a very exciting time to be in Oklahoma film these days. I'd like to start out by letting people get to know Matt and Rachel a little bit because you guys are from Oklahoma originally, kind of went off to the LA land, La La Land, and did some exciting things. So tell us a little bit about your background in the film and television industry.
You want me to start, Rach?
No, go for it.
Okay. My name is Matt Payne. This is I've spoken on deadCenter panels before, but always as a screenwriter. So my background is from Oklahoma. Moved to California in 2001 after graduating from the University of Oklahoma. Rachel and I were both Gray Frederickson's first interns back in the early Oklahoma film days. Moved out to Los Angeles and started off as a set PA on the TV show 24. I always knew that I wanted to be a storyteller, so I put my eye on the writer's room and eventually wound up on a CBS procedural television show called Without a Trace. From there, I started writing scripted television, CBS procedurals, and did a show called Defenders with Jim Belushi and Jerry O'Connell. moved over to a show called Memphis Beat with Jason Lee and Oklahoma's own Alfre Woodard. And then after that did a show called Vegas with Dennis Quaid and Michael Chiklis. It was a show created by a gentleman named Nick Pileggi and Greg Walker. Nick was the writer of Casino and Goodfellas, so a really cool show to be a part of. And as that show got canceled, I began to sort of turn my attention towards what was happening in Oklahoma, with what, the film office was doing, and we were working towards an incentive. What deadCenter created a lot of enthusiasm around the entertainment industry in Oklahoma City. Overall was changing with the Thunder basketball team, what was happening downtown and in the different districts, and I was ready for a change of scene. So I decided to move home. And when I got back to Oklahoma City, I was completely taken by how much the city had changed, and quickly found myself teaching screenwriting and film business at Oklahoma City University, and fell in love with education, but really fell in love with this sort of shepherding of talent and helping students grow, and eventually started making documentaries. And along the way, my business partner, Rachel Cannon, moved back to Oklahoma, and I'll turn it to her. And then we'll get into kind of how Prairie Surf was born.
Awesome. Hi, you guys. My name is Rachel Cannon. Like Matt said, grew up in Oklahoma, kind of all over the place in Oklahoma, and went to college at the University of Oklahoma, where I studied film. And then I threw all of my stuff in a car and I drove out to Los Angeles to pursue acting. Knew nobody in the industry. Didn't have any ends there really, but I had a great work ethic. And so I spent 20 years working in the industry as an actress, primarily as a sitcom actress, because that's my true love. And I got to do a bunch of incredible shows like 2.5 Men and Big Bang Theory. I got to guest on the last season of Mad Men as a sassy real estate with Don Draper. And I worked for the last 6 seasons on a show called Fresh Off the Boat, which was at the forefront of cultural diversity in television, which I'm very proud to be a part of. And, towards the end of that, I lived in Los Angeles for 20 years because that's where all of my job opportunities were. And as things started kind of shifting with the birth of streaming, I started noticing that all of my opportunities were in Vancouver or Australia or New York or Atlanta or New Mexico or anywhere other than Los Angeles. And so I took that as an opportunity to buy a house back home, be closer to family, and raise my little boy closer to, his cousins and grandparents. And I grabbed coffee with Matt Payne one day to talk about, just next chapter and kind of what he's working on. And I think at the beginning of coffee, we talked about writing a script together and, maybe making a project. And by the end of coffee, we were, scribbling out notes on a napkin on how to stand up a television industry here in Oklahoma, because, both of our backgrounds being in TV, we really saw the opportunity that the only thing missing here, there was a hunger for it in the state. There was incentive put in place. There was workforce. There was an incredible film office. There were people coming here. We just didn't have any sound stages. So Matt and I decided to plug that hole and partnered with the city to take over one of the largest buildings in downtown Oklahoma City. And it's been a wild year. It's good to be home.
You're on mute.
You're on your background.
Brandy, you're on mute.
No, there you are.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, you might just lean a little closer to the microphone though.
Sure. So I wanted to get Mayor Holt involved in this conversation because David, you have a background in sort of film support, going back a little bit of a ways back to whenever you were a state senator. So let's talk a little bit about your love of film and what you see as film and television and sort of what those industries can do for the city and the state.
Yeah, let me place it in really the most macro level possible. As a city, we went through really a depression in the 1980s due to our over-reliance on one industry, oil and gas. And it kind of taught us a lesson we've never tried to shake. We have been working at it for 40 years. We have tried to diversify our economy. And so obviously we still appreciate greatly the quality and high paying jobs that come from oil and gas, but we do a lot to try and encourage other industries so that when there are downturns in commodity prices, it doesn't devastate our city again like it did in the 1980s. So whenever anything else comes along that has some traction, some credibility as another opportunity for us, we always work pretty hard to encourage it. Obviously, aerospace is well known to be one of those industries that we've tried to diversify into here in Oklahoma, not the least of which is because Oklahoma City is the home of Tinker Air Force Base. But through the years, film has certainly emerged as another one of those industries. And I would actually tell you, Brandy, that my interest in supporting the local film industry predates even my time as a state senator. When I was my predecessor's chief of staff from 2006 to 2010, we had some of the first rumblings of these opportunities coming along. I mean, first of all was deadCenter. That was started a little bit before Mayor Cornett took office, but it was kind of reaching a critical mass in that sort of 2006, 2007 period. I remember spending a lot of time in that era with Khaki Porch and Melissa Scarabucci as that festival continued to grow. And we saw that as a foothold for the industry, you know, that the festival itself was a way to establish the industry here. And we were certainly encouraging of, even if I can't remember any specific initiative, but certainly encouraging of what was happening at OCCC with, many people recall Gray Fredrickson is kind of, and a pun intended, godfather of the film industry here in Oklahoma City and pushing that forward. And then we had an interesting experience that I still draw upon, which you may recall well, Brandy, and that was Saving Grace, the TV show that was set in Oklahoma City and ran for several seasons on TNT and had a A-list Hollywood star, Holly Hunter, fronting it, but was not shot here. And yet, because it was written by and produced by Nancy Miller, who now lives here in Oklahoma City, and had so many Oklahoma City ties inherent in its story. I mean, like the bombing was a major aspect of the whole storyline. They were always eating Johnny's burgers and drinking cherry limeades from Sonic and all these things. It was particularly bittersweet because it wasn't shot here. And there was a period, a trip in the 2007 period when the whole cast and crew and all the writers came down here for several days. We loaded them on buses, we drove around, and we toured the city so they could get a real sense of what it was that they were the story they were telling. And out of that came a little bit of a conversation. I don't know if I've ever even had this conversation with Rachel and Matt, but they said, you know what, we are interested in shooting further in Oklahoma City. Like at that point, they already had a season under their belts, but we want this series to be shot in Oklahoma City moving forward. We just need $3.5 million from the city to do that. That would be make up the gap of what it cost us to do this in Oklahoma City. And we talked about it, it's just, that was a lot of money. That was just more than we could justify. Nobody really it never got too serious because there was just nowhere to really pull that from. And so that didn't happen, obviously. And the series ran on for a few more seasons and it was a point of pride for us, but it didn't mean much to our film industry. But it was an interesting episode that I certainly remember in this whole journey. And then I did get elected to the Senate, and obviously Jill Simpson at the Oklahoma Film Office worked really hard to increase the film credit, because this isn't the first time this conversation has come up. And she worked through some reforms in the early part of this decade when I was a senator that I certainly supported. And all of that has kept things percolating, but it wasn't really until you started to get all these new elements coming together. First of all, facilities. Second of all, a dramatic increase in the film credit. And with those two things coming together, now you're kind of at a point where you still need some more things. You need people like Rachel and Matt out there hustling to get business here. You need a workforce, but it's all sort of coming together to clearly take us to yet another level. I mean, we've had a film industry for 20 years, and I'm telling you little glimpses of its growth through the decades, but now we're at a point where it's really going to go from a one level to a totally different level, I think, in the next couple of years. And to bring that back to my original point, that's great for Oklahoma City's macro economy to have yet another industry in our city that's truly a contributor, truly a major industry here. And I really believe that we can be one of the half dozen leading destinations for film production in the country based on what has happened just in the last couple of years, thanks to facilities like Prairie Surf and Green Pastures, and thanks to the dramatic change in the film credit this last session.
Ann and Rachel, most people have, or a lot of people in Oklahoma have a lot of memories of the Myriad, of the Cox Convention Center, the Myriad, whatever they know it as. I was just talking about, hey, I went to see Van Halen there whenever I was in college. So so there were lots of people who have those memories. So talk a little bit about what Prairie Surf has to offer, and maybe like how that building that we're also familiar with is sort of in one iteration. What made it work for what you guys wanted to do? Because obviously you guys looked at it and saw something completely different.
Yeah. Well, we, when we first looked at, Matt and I first started talking about infrastructure and being able to provide that soundstage experience. We were looking at every warehouse all over Oklahoma, just trying to find something that didn't have a bunch of beams in the middle. But by the time you bring in power and HVAC and Wi-Fi, and you build it out and you build in offices, because that's not what they're designed for. It's a tremendous amount of money that you're investing in making something work. So for us, when we found out that the new convention center was opening and that there wasn't really a plan in place for the Cox Convention Center, we sat down with the city and we had a conversation and just said, could we go and take a look at it and just see if the bones would work? And when Matt and I walked in, we've spent the last 20 years at studios and on sound stages. And so when we walked in, yes, it was an old convention center, and you look around and you see 500-pound chandeliers everywhere and green signs hanging down that are saying, exhibit halls this way, arena this way. But we got rid of all that. You know what I mean? Like we took all of that down and we put up, a fresh coat of paint. We did, we ripped 10,000 pounds out of the ceiling in what is now stage one, just of lights and speakers and extra stuff so that you can put up a wooden truss that allows for lighting and all the things that you need, and adding up all the soundproofing and blacking out the room. It's a soundstage. Like, it has been converted from something where they did tattoo conventions many years ago to now something where they can film a TV series. So it's been a really exciting transformation. And what I will say is, this is a building that has tons of, it has all the power you need, all the Wi-Fi, all the HVAC, all the amenities. And it has so much space at 1.3 million square feet that we get to bring in all the vendors and the providers and the things that have been missing from the Oklahoma film community for so long, that we say, okay, great, what's missing? Let's go grab it and we can house it in here, so that there's just a broader landscape for Oklahoma film to thrive. And so I think that's been really exciting, just walking through it. I graduated high school in that building, so or this building. So it has a lot of memories for us personally as well. And I think being able to breathe life into something that has been such a wonderful source of memories for so many people for so many generations, being able to breathe new life into that, where, for decades more, you're going to be able to do something that is going to change downtown Oklahoma City for generations to come. And Matt and I feel very honored to have that opportunity.
So the first thing, my first memory in this building was seeing Milli Vanilli. And I won those tickets at a raffle at Sound Warehouse on Grand and May Avenue about 3 hours before it happened. And I took my dad to the concert, and he still to this day blames his hearing problems on Milli Vanilli. And it turns out they weren't even singing. So that was kind of my first memory. What I wanted to add is the good fortune of the former Cox Center. When we walked in here, we knew of sound stages, but we didn't know the soundstage business necessarily. But we knew what was needed. And Rachel and I, it was in the middle of the pandemic. We first day we walked in here was right before the basketball game happened across the street, and the city shut down. So over the course of the pandemic, we were able to convince people from LA, studio consultants, and we were able to convince unit production managers, high level people, hey, come check this thing out, kick the tires, like tell us, will this really work? We wanted to make sure that it would. We wanted to make sure the floor loads worked and the ceilings had what they need. And over and over and over again, you tell people about the facility and they go, yeah, they hear convention center and they think, tattoo conventions and the bar exam. And then they walk in here and people are just floored by the unique opportunity that we have over the last, 6 or so weeks. We've been bringing in executives, and these are the top of the top from the biggest studios in the world, and walking them through here. And it's very interesting to watch. They get on a Zoom because they're curious, and they're a convention center in Oklahoma. I don't know much about convention center conversion, and I don't know much about Oklahoma. So, well, we would like to bring you here. And then they come here, and the first thing they always say is, we pick them up and they say, God, people are so nice, and then they walk into the convention center and you watch their brains click into place as they walk into these giant, beautiful rooms, these clear span rooms, and they begin to see the industry. And then we begin to tell them the story about like how bootstrappy and soulful Oklahoma is. We take them to, eat dinner at the lake, and you watch the minds of these executives expand into a place of like, Oklahoma should be the place to shoot. And we've seen it happen again and again and again with filmmakers, with writers, directors, crews, staff. And we're very, very fortunate in that this building was here. But what's also been amazing is to be able to share our city and our state with these people that have never been here and didn't really understand it. And then you think about the messaging as like, our city begins to be featured in films and television, people will become more and more familiar with it. And that's really, really amazing. And anyway, for Rachel and I, in doing this and investing in this business, the city has become such an important piece of it in the state, So, as we think back to going to see Milli Vanilli, thinking that now here we are is really remarkable.
I was curious about talking to Mayor Holt, Mr. Mayor, about the benefits of having this space that used to be the convention center. Obviously, it's a very large space right in the middle of downtown with a lot of history. Let's talk about the benefits of having it be able to immediately be, first of all, filled with have someone come in, but then also specifically have Prairie Surf come in, because I think we all know that big empty buildings aren't necessarily great for any part of a city, much less the middle of downtown. So let's talk about the benefits, both on that level in terms of just filling the building, but then and finding a new use for it, but then also specifically for what's good about bringing Prairie Surf. How does that benefit the city?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of serendipity here. We had this building that was coming available because we were opening our MAPS 3 convention center just down the street. And this building has an arena, and there are occasional tenants in there, but other than that, all the usable spaces in that building were really going to move, relocate to the new convention center. And we actually had some contractual obligations not to use those spaces for convention business, so that all the focus would be on the new convention center. So it was really unclear what the near-term future was for this building. And as you say, I mean, it one of those options could have been essential abandonment, kind of locking the doors and boarding it up and checking for vagrants occasionally, and that's not a great look for such a prominent space. So we really, when this conversation was kicking off, we really hadn't gotten our minds wrapped around that reality yet and what we were going to do. And so we never necessarily had to go too far down that road, because this was happening at the same time and kind of rescuing us from having to have that conversation. So I think it's really just a win-win, because there's this is not a huge commitment from the city. I'm not saying that there aren't some things that we're doing in partnership with Prairie Surf to make this work for them, but this is helping us. This is not, we didn't build this building just for them. So this isn't like some spec, attempt to build a film production facility in hopes that it'll work out, because we already had this building. It's sunk costs, it's nothing that we really had to commit much to. and they're able to repurpose it for something that could be spectacular for the city. And so I just think it's just a win-win. There's only upside for us. If their whole deal just doesn't work, and Matt and Rachel are tossing me the keys here in a couple of years, what have we lost? We're just back where we were before. I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm just saying that from the city's perspective, we will have not really put much into this effort. In fact, we would have had somebody at least filling that building and make use of the full purpose of it. And the chances are, I think, very good that they won't be tossing the keys back. They're going to be using that building for years to come, and we'll continue to not have to worry about it. In the meantime, yeah, I mean, Brandy, it's just a wonderful thing for the city. It's a tremendous use of the building. It really is. I know this has already been alluded to, but I mean, you're talking about a building with huge spaces, high ceilings, kitchens, parking underneath, the hotels across the street. I mean, it is an ideal film production facility. It's just been used for something else for the last 40 years. And so now it is realizing a purpose for which it almost feels like it was built. And so I think it's going to be enormously successful because there's other pieces in place as well, like the film credit. And it helps us potentially attract really large productions. There's really other great things happening in the city and around the state. And here in the city, of course, is Green Pastures. But they wouldn't tell you that they're in competition with Prairie Surf because they're physically smaller. It's a different kind of production that they're going to be working with. And I think they'll be successful as well. For Prairie Surf, with the Cox Center as their canvas, they could film Mandalorian there. They could film an Avengers movie there. I mean, it is a massive space. And so that's the kind of thing we think we can attract now to Oklahoma City. And to my earlier point and to your question, that's a game changer for our economy. If we can attract those types of productions with hundreds of jobs and millions and tens of millions of dollars of expenditures, and just look at what's happening up in Pawhuska right now. I mean, the largest production in state history, $200 million. That's the kind of thing we could contemplate attracting here with more regularity moving forward, thanks to having a facility like this.
Let's get an update from Matt and Rachel about what you guys have been doing. I mean, you've been converting the space, which didn't sound like it needed too much conversion in terms of like it didn't need like a full overhaul or anything. But you've been bringing people in to take a look. But let's talk about what you guys have going on now with Prairie Surf, and then you guys have been doing some work kind of behind the scenes with the legislature on some legislation that recently passed that I think you guys are pretty excited about.
Yeah. So I'll just to give a little context. So Rachel has been our champion at the Capitol, so I'll let her share that update for sure. But the last few months, what we've really needed to wait and see is what happened with this legislation. So what we've spent the last several months doing is a lot of soft marketing, reaching out to people that we know, our contacts. We've been building our sizzles. We've been renovating. So now, we have one completed soundstage, or the arena is very, very close to being finished. So it's been a lot of conversion, a lot of sharing what's coming. And we're building out our team. And once the credit passed, we've been in the last week or so, we've kicked into full on get people here. So like I said, we've been hosting executives, decision makers, and showing them around. And one of the things that's important to us is we'll take, we'd love to have a movie in there tomorrow, but we really want to make sure that we have large projects that are good for the economy, to create lots of jobs. We've been working with all the different schools, career techs, Oklahoma City University. Was on the phone with Gray Frederickson earlier today talking about OCCC. So figuring out where our workforce is, so it's been getting ready. And kind of once the legislation passed, that was kind of the gun going off. And I'll let Rachel, you want to jump in and give kind of an update on that?
Sure. When we stepped into this space, like Matt and I have just, we have learned so much in the past 2 years in just getting this process up and going. And one of the ways in which I think we have grown the most is stepping into the public policy and learning how to help influence legislation and to get things passed. And When we first started lobbying 18 months ago, the conversation was $8 million is great, but it's not enough to bring television. It's not enough to bring this series. It is something that matches up perfectly with an office that is in tourism, because it's touring through, it's stopping and doing a little film, and then it's going on. But if we want, as we've switched into commerce this year, which we are so excited about, it's more about like, this is a business. This is about jobs. This is about economic diversity and setting up a new vertical that creates more sustainability. And so Matt and I commissioned an economic study a year ago with one of the state's top economic modelers. And he really did a deep dive into incentives to really showcase what was on the table and what we could do and how we could construct it in a different way. And so Senator Roger Thompson, we say he's our bulldog. Like, he went to bat for the film industry. If anybody sees Roger Thompson on the streets, just go hug that man. He really has championed this so much. And he let us in all the meetings. I mean, we spoke to every group you can imagine: Rural Caucus, Future Caucus, the Senate and House Wives. We did tours for the Democratic Caucus, the Republican Caucus, like every group you can imagine. We sat down and had, I can't even tell you the amount of 4-hour dinners that I sat educating legislators on the economics of the film industry and telling them how this is something that takes somebody from making $18 an hour on a construction set here in Oklahoma somewhere to building those same houses on a soundstage where you don't put a roof on, you don't finish the walls on the outside. Sometimes you don't even do 4 walls, you only do 3, and yet they're getting $40 an hour to do that because it's just a higher paying industry that has pension and benefits. And why don't we want to do that for Oklahomans? So, you know, we spent the last 6 months pretty intensively at the Capitol every single day. Either they were at our house or we were at theirs, and just really sharing the story of what this could do for Oklahoma. And the fact that we went from 8 to 30 in the first year that we were really championing for it, we are enormously grateful for the collaboration with our state. We promised to show them how the state can get a major return on investment, and that we will be back next year to ask for a little more money. But from a position of, I told them that we want them to actually come and ask us if they can provide more money for an industry, because it is so good for Oklahoma. So we're really looking forward to, showing Oklahoma that this is a viable business and it is something that is really good for us. And Mayor, you go back to Nancy Miller's story. She came here when we first opened, and one of the comments that she made was, I did everything I could to shoot that project here in Oklahoma, but we just weren't set up for TV yet. And she said she was going to the private sector, just asking anybody, please give me money and let me do this project here. So I told her we're going to do her next TV series here. So we're going to bring her out of retirement, make her write another one.
Great.
Great idea. So, so one of the things about the new incentive, the Filmed in Oklahoma 2021 Act that did pass, is it does raise or does create a higher level of cap from 8 to 30. The $8 million is still in place until it sunsets, but we also have now a $30 million incentive. But it also has some upticks to it, is kind of what I've heard them described as. You start out with a 20% rebate, and then you sort of add on to it. And one of those add-ons is sound stages. Using a sound stage gets you, you get a boost on your rebate if you use a sound stage. So let's just talk about why sound stages are such a key part. If people aren't familiar with the industry, why are they such a key part a key piece to have in sort of building a film and television industry in your state?
Sure. Well, if you look at the economic study that we did, what Dr. Speed found was that a large part of that was tied to TV series being filmed on sound stages. And a lot of that is because you get more of an economic impact because of the amount of jobs that it creates. If you think about shooting on location, a lot of shooting on location tends to be, we'll grab our crew and we'll go shoot in this house, but you're not having to build that house and pay. Like if you're doing it on a soundstage, it's just a big empty box, and you have to build the whole world inside there. So it's construction jobs, it's painting jobs and welding and rigging and electricians, and it just creates hundreds of jobs. And that's because you're building the world inside of that. And especially in TV, usually you have one soundstage with your sets, and on your swing set, on the other side is where you're going to build the sets that are typical for that episode. And so it's just constant construction, it's constant building, it's just turning over those worlds in a way that it just creates. There's a lot more spending. That's a lot of lumber. That's a lot of people staying in hotels, and just the impact that you're going to get all around the city. And so the strategic upticks that we put in place, we were at 35% before, and we said, drop that to 20 and make them earn it. Make them come in and spend money in our infrastructure, spend money in our post and music, spend money in rural Oklahoma, like push them into the places that help us really build this industry in a really strong, profound way. And the ones that are truly partners with us, which are using all of those services, give them the most money back. Like, they deserve that, because they're spending so much money in our state and in our economy, that we will still benefit from that. So a lot of the reason that we really tied it to the sound stages is because that's where the state can make the most return on investment. And we want the state to make so much money that they never want this incentive to go away.
That sounds like a good goal to me. I like it. Of course, I enjoy getting to cover all the film stuff, so that makes it more fun. It's more fun for me to write about stuff that's happening here than stuff that's happening in other states. That's boring. So, Mr. Mayor, I was wanting to know, from your perspective, what do you see as other communities can do kind of in the state to make themselves sort of a film-friendly place? I think that Oklahoma City is kind of developing a little bit of that. I mean, it's hard not to whenever you have sound stages right in the middle of downtown, of developing that sort of film-friendly reputation. Can you talk about what other cities can do throughout the state to develop that?
Brandy, it's not my first instinct to advise other cities on how to compete with Oklahoma City on film productions. So first of all, I don't want any other cities in the state to even make an attempt, really, to be honest with you. But if they do, I think we have certainly built a model here with facilities. I think what you see out at Green Pastures with the training that's going on there, that's probably pretty smart. The more that you have a built-in workforce is really going to be important. And look, we're having a conversation locally that maybe other cities, it may not be for everybody if you're not big enough, but we're having a conversation locally that other cities might be interested in, which is about whether we have some version of our own kind of local film incentive that would be layered on top of the state's film incentive, so that we can attract production specifically to Oklahoma City and not anywhere else. And so that's something that may begin bubbling up over the next few years here in Oklahoma City, or maybe in other places. But that's definitely a conversation we're having. We're blessed that our voters have twice approved economic development incentives, 2007 and 2017. So we have a funding source. We just have to kind of figure out how to tailor it to this specific industry, because it's a little different than what we're used to. But that's a conversation that's having, and something that we hadn't talked about yet, but it could be a city by city incentive that might be interesting.
Thank you for letting me push you out of your comfort zone momentarily for that. So, so far, I guess, have you been into Prairie Surf recently, Mr. Mayor? Are you? I know you're a guy who probably attended a few shows at the Marriott in his day. Is it fun to go in there and sort of see what it's become?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I was there, I guess maybe about a month ago, most recently. And I don't know, it was a crazy time in the pandemic when the Kurt Warner movie was shooting. I don't remember. I wanted to spiritually go down there, but physically I never made it. So I definitely am going to make a point, however, when there is when Rachel and Matt's work completely pays off and they get some big production in there. I'm going to be there with bells on, and I'm looking forward to that. But for whatever reason, I find myself in there nevertheless every few weeks. And yes, it's fun to see what they're doing there and to see the changes, and yeah, and to remember what it once was. I mean, lots of people in this city obviously do have a lot of memories. It's kind of amazing, all the artists. We could have a whole panel just on that, probably, just to think, we'd have to bring in different people, maybe older people, to talk about some of the 60s and 70s, or I guess 70s, artists that were there that are pretty legendary, like Queen and Led Zeppelin and all of those stories. But it's definitely got a lot of great history, some of which Matt has dug up. I don't think you've mentioned, Matt, your discovery of the myriad sport coats yet. And
I'll grab.
There's a myriad sport coat. I didn't know this story,
It's
but
wonderful.
wonderful.
So about 2 or 3 weeks ago, this place it really is 1.3 million square feet, which is an unfathomable amount of space. And so there are closets in closets that are, but it's wild. So one of our coworkers came into my office with this jacket, which is, if you look at the piping on the sleeves, this is the old 70s Usher jackets. So I got 3 of them. And so we find, so there are all these left, old photos and posters of, from the Davis Cup and from the Harlem Globetrotters. I mean, you really do get a sense of all the cool stuff that's come through Oklahoma City. And, I think for us, like generationally, like it's really fun to reflect on kind of what all has been in Oklahoma City and how much it's really changed, it's cool.
And you guys have returned from Oklahoma. You come back to Oklahoma. Now you've got this venture that you've launched. You're not the only ones. I think there's some other members of your team who were from here, who went off to LA, who've come back. I think there are more people at Prairie Surf that have sort of made the return trip to Oklahoma. And so talk about getting to do this. I mean, as somebody who's come back to your home state, and talk about getting to take on such a really big 1.3 million square foot venture.
I like Rachel's answer too, but for me, I had the opportunity to really see kind of firsthand, watch the pioneer woman and what Ree Drummond was able to do up in Osage County, and how she took a town, took a risk in building that mercantile, had her show there, and how like just the infusion of energy has changed Pawhuska, and obviously now it's going to increase even more because of Killers of the Flower Moon. But and looking at the Oklahoma City Thunder and all the MAPS projects, like we've taken big risks. And if you look at like the places in Oklahoma that are interesting, they're cool because people took big swings, and like for me, like I could stay in LA and keep writing procedural television shows, which is great, and I'm doing something I love, but in the spirit of Oklahoma and growth, we decide, why not swing bigger? Why not try to create a space where we can allow thousands to create. This is a generational project for us, and we're fortunate to stand on the shoulders of the Gray Fredricksons and the film office, the former film commissioners. It's kind of who we are. And we talk a lot about, when these executives come back, like, you couldn't do this anywhere else. There's no chance that if you're in Los Angeles, you're going to take over the old LA Convention Center, the Forum. It's never going to happen. Oklahoma is receptive to good ideas and big ideas, and our leadership's willing to invest in us. And that's so amazing. And it allows people like Rachel and I to take big swings. So it's been a real privilege to be back here and get to try and do something like this.
Yeah, and I will just add on to that with my own experience. I did multicam sitcoms for a really long time, and it's a live audience working with, where the audience literally becomes a character in the story. Like you hear their laughs when you're watching the episode of 2.5 Men or Big Bang Theory, and it's something that I would love to bring a live audience show to Oklahoma City, because I know that the fans would bring a different experience to people in the industry who have never experienced fans like they would in Oklahoma. And I always say it's like a tailgate party for the entertainment industry, and nobody does tailgate parties like Oklahomans. And I just think that there is an opportunity to do something incredibly special in the middle of the country. And Oklahoma should be at the forefront of that. And since we've opened this place, I've gotten so many messages from sitcom directors or showrunners or, just people that I've worked with over the years. And Jamie Widows being one of those who directed me in 2.5 Men. And we also did a pilot together. And prolific sitcom director. And he sends a message and he goes, "Are we creating a show in Oklahoma City? What is happening? This is so fun." So there are more people watching and paying attention to what's happening here. And I think that just the opportunities are going to be endless. And Matt and I are very passionate about this not being a Hollywood enclave in the middle of downtown Oklahoma City that is for Hollywood, but instead this is a house that we are building for Oklahoma that we let Hollywood come and be a guest in. But this is very much for Oklahoma. We want our kids to experience something that wasn't here when we were growing up. We left, we had to do what we wanted to do. We want that to not be the case for the next generation.
That's an excellent segue, because I wanted to ask Mr. Mayor what he thought about these kind of opportunities that are brought about by projects like this. You have multiple Oklahoma natives on this team that went off to LA, did things in LA for years and years, and now they're back in Oklahoma creating industry, creating jobs, creating opportunities. Is that something that, from your perspective as the mayor, is exciting, that maybe the next generation, my kids, your kids, don't need to go to LA if they want to be in the film industry? Is that exciting?
Yeah, well, first of all, to unpack that, there's one recurring theme there that's become very common here in Oklahoma City, and that's people coming back. We've also got a lot of people coming here for the first time, but we also have a lot of people who grew up here during that time period when young people couldn't wait to get away. They felt like they were growing up in an alternate universe outside of American pop culture, and they had to get to Dallas or LA or Houston or New York or anywhere but here. And a lot of that generation is returning. And in more recent years, a lot of folks don't ever leave, and then on top of that, we have, migration in from people who never lived here before, but have heard great things. So it's really cool to see people return and do great things. And there's a lot of stories like that in Oklahoma City, and not just in the film industry. I mean, I left for 7 years and went to DC, and I wouldn't have come back necessarily if not for the changes that were clearly happening due to maps. So there's a lot of that. And yeah, I mean, I feel like there was more to your question and I've talked myself out of it. I can't even remember what you said, but
from a generational perspective, is it exciting to think that I think Rachel, Matt, you and I all have kids. I mean, is it exciting to think that they won't need to go somewhere else?
Oh, yeah, right. Specifically, like how we're building a film industry so that people can experience that here. Yeah, no, that's really cool, and kind of hard to believe, but I can definitely imagine it at this point, that you could come of age in Oklahoma City and go through training and degree programs at Oklahoma universities for film, and just stay right here and join the efforts at Prairie Surf, and just move on from film production to film production. I mean, that's the hard thing for some people to always understand with film is, unlike every other form of business, it's not really usually a long-term deal. It's a few months, maybe a few years, but it ends eventually. And so, but if you create a nexus like they have in Atlanta, like they have in New Mexico, obviously like they have in LA, you just pick up one leads to the next. And so it's an industry of many different productions that pick up where the last one leaves off. And that's what we want to create here. We don't want it to be as sporadic as it has been. We've been excited to have had sporadic activity over the last 20 years. That was better than what we had the previous 20 years. But we are now, I think, entering an era where sporadic is giving way to dependable, regular work for people in our state. And that obviously will be an exciting thing for rising generations.
Very exciting. So Matt, Rachel, as we wrap things up, do you want to give us a little bit of a sneak preview of what might be coming for Prairie Surf? I'm sure there are lots of things that can't be talked about yet, but if there are any that you can give any hints, now's the time for the Prairie Surf trailer, I guess, kind of.
Well, we're talking to, like Matt kind of alluded to earlier, instead of talking to one-off productions, we are talking to studios. Like we're literally talking to Apple and Amazon and Hulu and Disney and Stars and Paramount. Like, these are the people that we're talking to, because it's not, will you bring one show here? It's, will you come set up here and bring multiple? To what the mayor said, it's about creating that sustainable industry where it's project after project after project. And Matt and I have been on the phone nonstop in the past 10 days, just talking to all our industry connections, and people are super excited about coming and putting their feet on the ground and walking around. And I mean, the, head of production from Stars was here yesterday and looking around the facility, and he was just like, this is perfect. Like, this is, you can shoot a show in here. Like, this is exactly what you need. And so to have that kind of validation from people in the industry has been really exciting, just to see that it's not, if you build it, they will come, but it is, hey, we built it, come on. So we're really excited. We're having a lot of conversations, obviously, that we can't talk about yet until the ink's dry, but we are ready to get Oklahoma busy. So what I will say is, if you have any interest in the film business, even if you think it doesn't apply to you, if you do construction or finance or makeup or catering, like, there's a job for you. So if you have any interest, register with the film office, make sure that people know that you are interested, because there's gonna be a lot of work, and that we're gonna need a lot of people to work in this industry.
Matt, any parting thoughts?
No, I think, the one thing that we didn't really touch on is the importance of Oklahoma filmmakers. Yusuf, like, I love every short film you've made. I absolutely love. And, this is very much about creating jobs and an economic impact in businesses. But Oklahoma, we want to tell Oklahoma stories, and we want to empower Oklahoma storytellers. So, we're very interested in hearing Oklahoma stories. And I hope, my hope for this business is that, in 5 years, we are not just employing, Oklahoma grips and sound technicians, but that kids are coming out of our schools and our programs, and they're becoming the next generation of, like, global filmmakers. This is about empowering Oklahomans to be creative and tell powerful Oklahoma stories. And, I know that that's something for me that is a very, very high priority, and we can look forward to.
Thanks everyone for your time today, for participating in the panel. I'll kick it over to Yusuf now to wrap us up.
Hey, real quick though, Brandy, thank you. You do so much to focus local interest on these stories and on the film industry. So you probably don't get thanked enough for that. So I think we should take a moment to thank you.
Well, it is my pleasure. It's been a real fun experience and journey to get to follow along with the industry, with deadCenter, with various filmmakers, and now with Matt and Rachel, and what all of their cinematic adventures. Thanks for letting me be part of it.
100%. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for being a part of this today. Matt, thank you for those kind words at the end too. It made me think, I had this dream too, that I was going to have to do the LA thing at one point. But once I found that the opportunities were here in Oklahoma, I stayed. And I keep hearing more and more stories like this from crew. Even just a couple of years ago, someone who had planned to go work in Atlanta for the summer, but he kept getting back-to-back films here. And that's the kind of sustainability and future we're talking about. And we are so excited that the doors are open for Prairie Surf and the future to come. So thank you, Mayor Holt, for your city and support for film and the arts here in Oklahoma, the business of arts. And Matt and Rachel, thank you for everything you're doing for Prairie Surf. And Bam, we appreciate you moderating and hosting our conversation today, and look forward to the future and connecting with you all later down the line. Thank you so much for everything today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.